He just walked in off the street, old boots, dust on his coat, holding a burlap sack like it was something sacred. No one saw it coming. That's what the bank manager would say later. But in the moment, everyone just stared. Downtown Atlanta, a Thursday morning, the usual corporate buzz, heels on marble floors, quiet clicks of keyboards, bland smiles behind glass desks, a typical day at Hamilton Reserve Bank, until he pushed open the glass doors. Old, black, weathered, maybe 75, maybe more. His back slightly hunched, beard gray and wiry, coat hanging off his shoulders like it had stories of its own. He didn't say hello, didn't ask for help. He walked straight up to the front desk, placed the sack gently at his feet, looked the young receptionist in the eye, and said in a voice smooth like worn leather, "I'm here to claim what's mine. This bank belongs to me." A beat of silence, then laughter. Not the polite kind, the dismissive kind, the "oh Lord, another crazy" kind. A few people chuckled. One man turned to film on his phone. Security shifted in their chairs, and the receptionist, trying to hide a smirk, asked, "Sir, do you need to speak with a financial advisor?" The old man shook his head. "No, child. I need to speak with whoever's in charge. The land this building sits on was my grandfather's, and I've got proof." He tapped the sack. They weren't listening. They were already moving to get him out. But what they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the sack wasn't full of rags or nonsense. It was full of receipts, literal ones, legal ones, proof of betrayal, proof of ownership, and a story that was about to tear the whole place wide open. His name was Moses Tate, born in 1949, raised in rural Georgia on land passed down from his grandfather. Land that once stretched across acres before it was taken, bit by bit, through shady deals and slick talk. He grew up hearing the stories, how his grandfather signed contracts he couldn't read, how the county claimed back taxes that were never owed, how the land kept shrinking until nothing was left, except a single plot, one that, through a mistake in zoning and a paper trail buried deep, still legally belonged to the Tate family. And on that plot, Hamilton Reserve Bank. Moses had never been to the bank before, but he'd been watching. He'd been gathering papers, tracking history, pulling deeds from county records and legal archives like a man building a bomb out of truth. It wasn't revenge, it was restoration. But to them, he was just another old black man talking crazy. Security approached him slowly. "Sir, we're going to need you to leave," one said, hand on his belt. Moses didn't flinch. He reached down, unknotted the top of the sack, and pulled out a folder, thick, yellowed, packed with documents. He looked directly at the bank manager who had just walked over, an expensive pen clipped to his chest, and said, "Before you put your hands on me, read this." The manager didn't. Not yet. Instead, he looked at Moses the way people look at someone beneath them. "Sir, if you don't leave, we'll be forced to call the police." Moses took a slow breath. "You go ahead and do that, but when they show up, make sure they bring someone who knows property law." Back home, Moses lived alone. No wife, no kids, just memories, and this mission. For over a year, he'd pieced together a trail of injustice so precise it would hold up in any court. He'd found the original deed, the underhanded sale that was never finalized, and a clause, one that stated that if the final payment wasn't made within 90 days, the land would legally revert to the original owner's descendants. That payment was never made. The clause was never removed. And now, 63 years later, it came knocking. He didn't want attention. He didn't want fame. He just wanted them to see him. Back at the bank, things had shifted. A young teller, Jasmine, 24, fresh out of college, student loan debt piled high, noticed the old man wasn't yelling, wasn't causing trouble. She peeked at the document he held, saw a notary seal, saw an official court stamp dated 1971. Something about his calm made her uneasy, in a good way. She leaned toward the manager. "Maybe we should read it, just in case." The manager rolled his eyes, but some small voice in his head, told him to look. He flipped through the first few pages. Then his smile faded. The bank manager snapped the folder shut. I don't know what this is, but it's not how business is handled. You don't just walk in off the street with a sack of papers and claim a building. Behind him, a few customers laughed. One man, mid-30s, Bluetooth earpiece still in, shook his head and muttered, "Some folks will say anything for a payday." Security moved closer. The old man didn't budge. "You laugh now," he said quietly, "but truth don't care if you believe it. Truth stays true." The manager raised an eyebrow. "Sir, we're giving you two options. Leave peacefully or be escorted out." Moses looked down at the sack. He didn't speak, didn't argue. He bent over slowly, hands steady, and untied it completely. Then, without saying a word, he tipped it over. The sack spilled out across the polished marble floor. Legal documents, land surveys, handwritten letters in faded ink, a leather-bound Bible with property notes scribbled in the back pages. Black and white photos of the land before the city rose around it. One photo, curled at the edges, showed three men standing proudly in front of a wooden fence. One of them was Moses's grandfather. The caption scribbled on the back read, "Tate Family Land, 1932. South Lot, East Facing." Still, no one moved. No one cared. They just saw an old man making a mess. The receptionist rolled her eyes. Security gave each other, "Here we go" looks. A suited banker whispered, "Get maintenance to clean that up." But the camera phones kept rolling, because something about the moment was uncomfortable. They didn't know if it was sad, funny, or real, but they kept filming. Moses stood tall. "You ever wonder who owned the ground you stand on?" He asked no one in particular. "You think it was always yours just because you got a key card and a nameplate?" Silence. The security guard, a black man in his 40s, built thick, strong hands, hesitated. Something about Moses reminded him of his own grandfather. The posture, the fire in the eyes. "Sir," he said, softer than before, "I don't want to hurt you. Please don't make this harder." Moses gave a small smile. "You're not the one hurting me." The camera shifted. The mood shifted. And for the first time, someone looked down. Really looked at what was on the floor. Jasmine, the young teller, knelt down. She picked up one of the papers, a county deed from 1965, stamped, signed, notarized. It wasn't fake. It wasn't vague. It was real. She glanced at the Bible, saw the notes, parcels numbered, coordinates written carefully. The manager leaned down to grab the documents out of her hand, but she pulled away. "No, wait. This is something," he scoffed. "Don't get caught up in this nonsense." Jasmine stood, now holding two papers in her hand. "Sir, this isn't nonsense. These are actual legal documents. Look at the stamps. This one has a probate seal." More people gathered. The laughter faded. Now there was tension in the air. Someone whispered, "What if he's telling the truth?" Moses bent down, reached into the sack again, and pulled out one more thing, a faded envelope. On the front, "Return to Moses Tate, if undelivered." Inside, a letter from the Atlanta County Clerk, dated 1984. It confirmed a pending review on a land dispute involving the Tate family, but was never followed up. "They ignored this," Moses said. "Lost it. Buried it. I kept every piece, every letter they hoped I'd forget." He looked around. "Y'all think this is about money?" he asked. "This is about being seen. My family was erased, our land swallowed, and now I'm just a crazy old man with a bag full of ghosts." The shame settled in, slow, heavy. The mocking tone was gone. People looked at him differently now, not with fear, but with something more dangerous. Doubt. Doubt in the bank. Doubt in the system. Doubt in the story they'd always believed. That if someone looks poor, they must be wrong. Moses didn't yell, didn't demand. He just stood there, surrounded by truth, waiting for someone to finally look. Jasmine sat at her desk now, documents spread out in front of her like a puzzle that was finally starting to fit. The bank manager hovered nearby, arms crossed, annoyed. "It doesn't matter what he says," he muttered. "This isn't real." But Jasmine wasn't listening anymore. Her eyes scanned every seal, every signature. She knew how to spot a fake, and this wasn't one. Everything checked out. A notarized deed from 1961 showing ownership of a parcel of land now known as Block C, where Hamilton Reserve Bank proudly stood. Another paper from 1970 confirmed a temporary development lease issued to a construction company. No record of sale, no closure. She whispered almost to herself, "They never bought it." Moses nodded slowly. "That's right. The bank had built its empire on shaky ground. Literally, the land was never truly theirs. Somewhere along the way, someone buried the paperwork, built the building anyway, and assumed no one would ever come looking. But now Moses was here, and he had everything." Jasmine stood up, voice steady now. "We need to call legal. This isn't a joke." The manager's face flushed. "You're not authorized to make that call." "Then you make it," she shot back. The tension in the room snapped. People who had laughed earlier were now whispering. Phones weren't just recording anymore. They were streaming, posting, tagging. And outside, word had already started spreading. A crowd was forming. The security guard, still standing by Moses, looked at the mess of documents on the floor. He bent down, picked up the family photo. He stared at it for a second. "That your grandfather?" Moses nodded. That was his land. He trusted the system. It betrayed him. The guard gave a small, quiet sigh. "Looks like you didn't." "No," Moses said. "I trusted the proof." Long before the glass walls, before the parking lots and polished lobbies, there was just dirt, red Georgia soil and open sky. The land stretched wide, chickens in the yard, smoke from a wood-burning stove, and in the center of it all, a man named Henry Tate, Moses's grandfather. In 1932, Henry bought 18 acres outright. No loans, just savings from working the railroad and picking up odd jobs after dark. That land was everything. It was food, shelter, legacy, and it was rare for a black man in the South during segregation to legally own anything that couldn't be taken away with a nod and a pen. But they tried anyway. By 1954, white developers had started circling. The city was expanding. New roads, new buildings, new plans. They offered Henry pennies on the dollar, pressure deals, threats, shady contracts. He said no, over and over. Until one winter, they showed up with papers claiming he owed back taxes. He didn't, but no one listened. They forced him into signing a lease agreement he didn't understand, saying it was just temporary use. He didn't have a lawyer. He couldn't afford one. And in the eyes of the law, the lease gave them everything they needed to break ground. Henry tried to fight. He wrote letters, pleaded with the county, but the system wasn't built to hear him. So he passed everything he had, every paper, every note, every map, to his grandson. He told Moses, "One day they'll forget what they did, but you won't. Keep this. It's yours." And Moses did. As the city grew, the Tate land disappeared, piece by piece, until all that remained was one sliver, never fully transferred, never fully theirs. That sliver is where Hamilton Reserve now stands. And for 60 years, no one noticed, because they never expected someone like Moses Tate to come back with proof. But now he had, and everything was about to change. By the next morning, the footage had gone viral. Clips of Moses standing in the bank, papers at his feet, voice calm but unshakable, shared and reshared across every platform. "Old black man claims bank built on stolen family land." The headlines wrote themselves. News vans pulled up outside Hamilton Reserve before they even opened their doors. Cameras, reporters, microphones shoved in faces. The internet was buzzing, and people were watching closely. Because this wasn't just about a deed, it was about history. It was about all the families who'd been forced to give up land they once owned, but never got credit for. And Moses? He wasn't hiding. He returned to the bank that morning, dressed the same coat, same sack, same quiet fire in his eyes. But this time, he wasn't alone. Activists, elders, lawyers, even strangers who saw their own grandparents in him. The bank tried to keep things quiet, closed the lobby, issued a bland press release. "We're reviewing the matter and cooperating fully." But behind the scenes, they were in panic mode. By noon, their lawyers reached out with a deal. They offered Moses a check, 7 figures, enough to buy peace, to disappear the whole thing. He didn't even look at it. It was never about the money, he said. It's about the names that were erased. It's about the families who were cheated and told to forget. It's about dignity. The room went quiet. Then he added, and if you think I'm going to take a check and let you rewrite the story, then you haven't been listening. What Moses wanted was simple: public recognition, a formal apology, in writing and on record, historical correction, acknowledgement of the Tate family's land and others like them, restitution, a community fund for displaced black families whose land was seized through unjust means. And one more thing, his grandfather's name restored to the property records. He didn't want the bank. He didn't want revenge. He wanted truth. And for once, people were listening. It didn't take long. Under mounting pressure, leaked documents, and nonstop public outrage, Hamilton Reserve's top brass started to fall like dominoes. The CEO resigned. The legal head was relieved of duties. And the development firm responsible for the land deal back in the 60s was hit with lawsuits. Not just from Moses, but from other families now coming forward with their own buried deeds. What started with one man became a wave. But Moses, he stayed quiet. He turned down interviews from national outlets. He didn't show up for photo ops or late-night talk shows. He said what he needed to say already. The bank was forced to hold a press conference. Outdoors in front of a plaque they just mounted on the side of the building. It read, "This land once belonged to the Tate family. Through oversight and injustice, that history was buried. Today, we honor it." His grandfather's name was engraved in bronze. A small gesture, but one that meant everything. After it all, Moses didn't move to a bigger house, didn't buy a new car, didn't change. He went home, to his modest place on the edge of town, the same porch he'd sat on for years. And one afternoon, as the sun dropped low and golden across the street, he watched a group of kids playing in the dirt lot next door. They were laughing, free, no weight on their backs, no history on their shoulders, just open sky and joy. Moses smiled, because he knew something they didn't. They were playing on land that now had a name again. His name. This wasn't just about a deed, or a bank, or a lawsuit. This was about a man who refused to be erased, a family that held on to memory like it was gold, and a truth that waited 6 decades to be heard. It was about dignity, about the power of quiet strength, and how sometimes the most unstoppable force in the world is an old man with nothing left to lose, but everything still worth fighting for. Moses Tate didn't storm in with lawyers. He didn't shout. He walked in with a sack full of forgotten history and reminded the world that just because something was buried doesn't mean it's gone. So if you've ever been underestimated, if someone's ever looked at you and decided you were too small, too old, too late, remember this: truth doesn't need permission to speak. It just needs someone brave enough to carry it. If you've ever been dismissed, if your story's ever been ignored, drop it in the comments. And if you believe in standing your ground, in protecting what's yours, in speaking up even when no one's listening, hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe for more real stories that need to be heard.